We are here tonight in front of the British Parliament where hours ago Theresa May narrowly escaped political catastrophe. One day after her Brexit plan was killed by a vote of historic proportions, May has secured the confidence of the House, but barely.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325.
Just 19 votes spelled the difference between game over and play on. Having passed this hurdle, May must now work with a parliament still fractured and a European Union growing impatient. The time for playing games is over, the German foreign minister insisted today, adding that the EU might consider postponing the March 29th deadline to begin Brexit, but it's not flexible on the terms. Late tonight, Theresa May struck a tone of urgent resolve.
It will not be an easy task, but MPs know they have a duty to act in the national interest, reach a consensus and get this done.
The CBC's Thomas Degla was watching closely as May dodged her political demise in a country growing tired of endless drama.
Even in a place that's seen this much history, there's never been anything quite like the battle for Brexit. The tension outside Parliament rising to a fever pitch last night as the country wrestled with its future. Today came the glum realization nothing's changed, and Brexit is still stuck.
Here we are, almost 3 years on, no nearer to knowing what the hell is going on.
Westminster is in chaos.
They can't agree on the best way forward either, but the opposition thought they'd start by driving out the Prime Minister.
She lacks the authority on the world stage to negotiate this deal. Ultimately, she has failed.
Theresa May facing a no-confidence vote, still not offering a backup plan to her failed Brexit deal, still hanging on.
We do have a long way to go, but I don't believe a general election is the path to do that.
Simon Horton trains negotiators using simple steps that he says would apply to Brexit talks too.
So it's called the behavioral change stairway.
Step 1, listen. He would advise May to do more of that. And also,
rule number 1 in negotiation is have a clear outcome of what you want to achieve. And unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case.
She had been expected to overcome today's challenge in Parliament.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325.
But was likely still relieved to hear the result. Tonight, she chose the grand stage of Downing Street to address the country once again.
We must all work constructively together to set out what Parliament does want.
Yes, that's a pledge to listen more. Then, by Monday, she's set to return here with a plan, some way out of this mess.
Okay, so Thomas, the Labour Party obviously failed to oust her. Can you walk us through what ways it still has to maybe limit her options?
Yeah, well, some in the Labour Party see this as just the beginning. They want a series of no-confidence votes to embarrass the Prime Minister. There's also a movement within the party for what they call a people's vote, that second referendum. In fact, 71 Labour MPs signed a letter to their leader, Jeremy Corbyn, today, demanding he pile pressure on the Prime Minister for that second referendum. So far, he is refusing to do so. If anything, today has shown that not only does the Prime Minister not have control, neither does Jeremy Corbyn, and no one's willing to take ownership of this.
Okay, Thomas, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So how to explain the unsinkable Theresa May? How does she carry on, chasing a goal that borders on the impossible and wearing the blame for a kingdom stuck in crisis?
Ian Blackford.
Again with the derision.
The Prime Minister has no answer. She has failed.
That, Mr. Speaker, alone should be grounds for her to go.
Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that with every other previous Prime Minister faced with the scale of defeat last night, they would have resigned?
That is a very good point. Why no resignation? Why did Theresa May politically survive this day? How did she become the gravity-defying Prime Minister?
Margaret Thatcher.
Joey Jones, who used to work with her, saw those questions start when she called a general election that didn't go as her party had hoped.
From that moment, she said she was basically serving based on whether or not the party wanted her to serve. So it's a really weird situation in which she finds herself profoundly weakened. Every time you think she can't go any lower, her authority is shattered still further.
In the fall, her own party tried to oust her, an insurrection by Brexiteers in her midst.
This is not Brexit. This is a failure of government policy.
The Prime Minister.
She survived that quasi-coup attempt as well. An easy explanation? People in this country are quick to cite her doggedness. She just keeps pushing. The Prime Minister has heard that wielded as compliment and complaint, suggesting to BBC Panorama that she knows how and when to use her stubbornness.
You bide your time, and you're bloody difficult when the time is right and when it really matters.
But persistence alone doesn't explain her staying power.
This is the most turbulent premiership in political history for 100 years in Britain.
Prime Ministerial biographer Sir Anthony Selden, who also wrote the book How Tory Governments Fall, says there are 9 basic steps to collapsing. May's government has done all of them, and yet it still stands.
Why is she still there? Partly because she is very resilient, partly because there is no alternative waiting in the wing, a plausible successor around whom people can rally, and partly because there's no other plan.
Have you got a plan B, Prime Minister?
To be viewed as the least worst option is hardly praise, but it might not be wrong. No one else seems eager to steer the ship into waters quite this rough. If Brexit is a disaster, she'll wear it. Certainly the papers seem primed for that already. But in the end, if it works, wait for the praise for the brave brinkmanship, the references to her being underrated. Not yet, though. Now let the cartoonists take the temperature. This morning's offering in the Daily Telegraph, winter is coming. May trudges along and alone. Who better to comment on May's longevity than a fellow Conservative who tried to bring her down?
Why then did 120 of us vote against the Prime Minister yesterday?
It's been reported that Jacob Rees-Mogg held a champagne party last night after the crushing defeat of May's Brexit deal.
I'd look at it more as a meeting with a drink rather than a grand celebration.
As you just saw, he was behind that Conservative revolt against May in November. So famous for slamming the Prime Minister, he's shown here in effigy, booting her Brexit bus over a cliff. Many see Rees-Mogg as having his own sights set on 10 Downing. His ambitions are openly mocked, but make no mistake, he is popular in his party, and his vision of a Britain ruled only by itself has strong appeal. I met him earlier for his perspective on Brexit and his frequent target, Theresa May. It's interesting watching. As someone from Theresa May's own party who openly challenged her in the fall, how do you explain her staying power? She survived that vote tonight.
Well, the vote earlier was on whether she should be leader of the Conservative Party. The vote tonight was whether we should have a Conservative government. Understandably, all Conservatives want to have a Conservative government because the country being led by a hard left Marxist Jeremy Corbyn would be disastrous.
Do you think she has some remarkable staying power, though? Because some people think she survives tests, others wouldn't.
Absolutely, no. She makes the Duracell bunny look like a lightweight, that she continues going when all others are left standing. It's very impressive.
But come March 29th, if Brexit happens without a deal, what some here call a hard Brexit, if you will, there is so much talk about what to be afraid of in that moment. As a hardcore Brexiteer, what's one tangible thing people should be looking forward to, from your view?
If we leave without a deal, we save £39 billion of taxpayers' money, which we don't have to hand over to the EU, and we can cut tariffs and non-tariff barriers. So we can import all sorts of wonderful things from Canada that we currently restrict.
That's a good attempt to speak to the Canadians. I appreciate that. But for the people of this country?
Well, that'd be good for the people of this country, because the pound in their pocket will go further, because the goods they buy from abroad will be cheaper.
Do you want to be Prime Minister of this country?
Me, no, I'm a backbench MP. If there were a change of leader tomorrow, I would support Boris Johnson for the leadership.
I'm trying to look deep into your eyes here because I'm not entirely convinced I believe you. I think a lot of people look at you and see great ambition there.
in our constitutional system, you don't go from being a backbench MP to being leader of the party when the party is in government. And I have to be realistic about that. So it doesn't matter whether I want to or not, it's not going to arise, and therefore it's sensible for me to support somebody who I think could lead Brexit effectively.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
No, that's a great pleasure.
So what's next for Theresa May? Here's a reminder of what she might be considering. May could go back to the EU. She could ask them for a better deal for Britain, concessions that would need to be swiftly negotiated before that deadline. Or she could ask to have the deadline pushed back. It's an unlikely option, but May could roll the dice by calling a snap election to try to gain more support in Parliament, or another referendum, something she's vowed not to do. Failing that, Britain could leave on schedule, but with no deal. So as Thomas mentioned, it's always possible for the Labour Party to introduce another motion of no confidence. If May is finally toppled, a group of MPs is said to be waiting in the wings, hoping to make a play for control of the House.